What's good? Little review once again. Kicking back, sipping on a little Mackey's Coke. You know it doesn't get better than this, people. Well, it does, but you know, I'm gonna pretend it doesn't. I listened to the entirety of Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation the other day, and I even had a little recap as of recent, just to go through a couple of tunes, just to realign my senses so I could have a little discussion with you in regards to my experience, and we'll see what I rate it and so forth. So I've never been a death metal head, at least not in the traditional sense. Traditional death metal to me, I like a little bit of punk infused with it. I do like the novelty value of more extreme styles of metal, and I do like heavy metal and thrash metal, but as far as death metal is concerned, you know, it's not my sort of party. It's not my sort of party. I'm not a push party head. I like to hardcore dance. I like hardcore music. Push pitting's not my thing. And I don't really have a head for headbanging no more, nor do I sort of find any of the riffs in death metal as headbangable as some of the more punk and attitude infused forms of metal. That's me. But I know a lot of death metal heads. I'm good friends with a lot of death metal heads and all that, and I thought, you know what, we'll give Suffocation a go. I actually seen Suffocation live like more than a decade ago now. I saw them, listen to this bill, right? I saw him with a band called Burning the Masses, who had been fronted by a dude called Big Chocolate at the time. He was big on YouTube back on the day because he had some ridiculous, dirty, grubby, guttural vocals. I think he might still be active in a project called Disfiguring the Goddess, alright? Just low, ignorant, primitive chug music. So that was pretty good. I think on the same bill, we had Annotations of an Autopsy, although I'm a little uncertain if that's the case. But to put a long story short, I have seen Suffocation. I don't think I saw them with Frank Mullen, to be fair. I don't know if Frank was with them at that particular moment in time, but there we go, and here we are. I listened to Effigies of the Forgotten, the first record, Effigy of the Forgotten even. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. There was a likeness to another record I heard for the first time as of recent, a record that came later on down the line, and that was Cryptopsy's None So Vile. I found there was a likeness as far as the production and atmosphere went, and you know, the guitar lines verging on what I would consider tech death, but a lot of people consider these bands tech death, and I can understand why. I think for me, my awareness of tech death, I got into understanding tech death through like high production, crazy stuff like The Faceless and Origin and stuff like that, later on down the line with a more modern production. So I'm not denying it is tech death, I just have a different perspective. I always throw the production into the mix. I always associate it with high end, like sparkly production. That's tech, innit? So that's that. Alternatively, we could call it brutal death. I'd call it brutal death as well, you know, because the vocals are mean, deep, crispy, froggy, guttural. Not like Demolich or, you know, gore grindy vocals, but a crisp, bubbly death metal vocal, as opposed to your traditional just sort of straightforward driving grunts and growls, you know. And it was Frank Mullen on that, so it's pretty good. Thing being, he doesn't really differentiate the vocals at all. There's no highs on this record. There's no high-end vocals, no shrieks or, you know, squeals of the like. So if you like them vocals, you're really going to like the record, but if you don't like them vocals, it's going to be a hard listen. Purely is, that's what you're going to be listening to throughout the entirety of the record. Guitar lines were interesting. There was a lot to remember. Speaking on the entire composition, there's 8 to 9 tracks on this record, and man, we went from section to section to section to section. We didn't necessarily revisit too many of the ideas too often. So as far as them getting into the studio and recording these tracks, let alone performing live with a whole set, it's a lot to remember. It's a lot to run through. But to me, the guitars weren't as important as the drums and the vocal. They were the standout elements to this sound. The vocal line and the vocal performance and the drum production sounded massive in accompaniment with just how the drums were performing on that record. I think they were the two highlights and really formed Suffocation. The riffs were great, but you know, I can't remember any of the riffs. Thing being, the very first track on this record, Liege of Inveracity, or Liège, I don't know what you would pronounce it as, that was the debut of slam death metal. That was the first slam riff ever written. So I'm looking forward to hearing the second record, purely as that was like the slam riff, and you didn't really get any more slams. You got like low denominator groovy chugs in the record from there on, but you didn't get any slam riffs, so to speak. So I'm looking forward to the next record to see if they picked up on it, and as to whether the audience reacted at such a fast rate that they thought, wow, we need to write more of these riffs now, and then banged it in the second record. Classic slam riff. It was nice, it was cool, it was good to hear, you know what I mean, the root of it, see where it came from. You know what I mean, a little piece of metal, well, it's not a little piece, that's a big bold piece of metal history, which might be quite understated as far as people referencing it. So that was good. And as far as the rest of it is concerned, it's very consistent, such as that Cryptopsy record. The Cryptopsy record's a lot more grind infused, I think. This was just like straight balls to the walls death metal. It was pure death metal, it was honest death metal. There was no elements that could turn a metalhead off in regards to it being a bit fluffy or a bit sparkly or a bit, you know what I mean? I don't want to use the term, but I'm gonna have to, like poser sort of elements creeping in. Me, myself, I don't really mind any of that sort of stuff, but I'm speaking in regards to, you know, your elitist person just getting into metal, who just wants to hear metal. It really is. It's a very pure, honest form of death metal. And I can't put that down. I can't put that down. For me, personally, enjoying a little more of a punk element, enjoying a little more attitude and energy. It's got plenty of energy, but energy in like a frantic sense, as opposed to like a balls against the walls, kickflip sense. You know what I mean? I aren't gonna revisit the record, not with an intention of just listening to music, because it doesn't necessarily suit my style too much. But that's not to say it wasn't a great record. It was incredibly consistent. If you do like death metal, then you are going to like that record, because from start to finish, it was cool. There was one riff, actually, one element, which I did like, which speaks volumes of my taste, and that was the very first riff of, I don't know, it might be track 7, potentially. It was just a hardcore punk riff. It was proper cool, very surprising, a great change of pace. They pulled it off very well. The production sounded fantastic with it. People in the comments said it was like a grindcore riff. I think the drop tuning and the production value gave it that sort of sound, but it was just a hardcore punk riff, and that was really good to hear. I enjoyed that. And so that was my highlight, to be honest with you. That was my highlight. I had heard the slam before, the slam riff in the first song, so that might have been my highlight, given that was my first time listening to it, but I had heard that before. So yeah, that punk riff was my favourite. And that's about it, really. The atmosphere really was brilliant. I think that, in collaboration with the artwork and the logo of the band and so forth, the instrumental and the producer and the sound engineer just really gelled really well, and it was a good record. So if you ask me for my rating, I'm going to give you 2 ratings. My personal rating, as far as what I enjoy, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. as far as advocating it for metal's sake and to a metalhead, man, it could be an 8.5 to a 9. It could be an 8. I like to go harsh. I'll give it an 8.5 just for my own purposes, because, you know, some bands really do appeal to me, and I don't want to disrespect them by just giving something such a high rating. But as far as metal is concerned, and for metalheads, I'll say, yeah, 8. Fuck it. We'll give it a 9. We'll give it a 9 for the metalheads, for the moshers, for the greebos, for the grungers. And I'm going to